Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This was the land for which the Hebrew slaves in Egypt dreamed for 120 years. God's hand had been on Moses. From Pharaoh God protected Moses from Pharaoh by hiding him in the bulrushes of the Nile. Moses then was raised a part of the royal household in Egypt, but he eventually killed an Egyptian taskmaster who was mistreating the Hebrew slaves. And as the story unfolds, Moses then escapes to the land of Midian to live in the quiet life of a shepherd. While in the quiet life, God calls him through a burning bush to become the liberator of God's people in bondage in Egypt. And over the next 40 years, Moses leads the people out of slavery across the parting of the Red Sea, through the wilderness to Mount Sinai, where he receives the Ten Commandments. And he has to wander a number of years in the wilderness. Now finally Moses and the people are ready to go into their promised land. The old life is ending. Their new life is on the verge of beginning. It's all good. The forward procession and progression, it seems logical, legitimate, and life-giving. However, you heard the text. Moses can see the land, but does not get to go in. Right at the threshold. On the verge of breaking the plane of the goal line. God does not allow Moses to go over with the people. Moses, the great prophet whom the Lord knew face to face, does not get to go over into the promised land. Instead, the writer says that God allowed him to get a view from the top. See it from a distance. And then Moses died. Moses died where he was, not where he was going. Moses died in God's care, and God buried him in a place where no one knew but God. Now, I don't know how that works for you, but this is hardly my ideal of an understandable, predictable story with a desired or an expected ending. In fact, I'm sorry to say, but this is a rather strange and peculiar end for one whose leadership was prominent, pivotal, and productive in his people's march into freedom, faith, and fruitfulness. The abrupt ending is certainly not the enduring and the everlasting effect one hopes to be remembered by after giving one's all. Moses, it stands to reason, warranted so much more. Still, the commentaries have no consensus on why it looks like Moses got the short end of the straw. They raise a lot of questions. Could it have been for punishment for Moses going off the handle, especially during the early days of his career? Was it God merely being random and good old Moses found himself in the wrong place at the wrong time? Was God abandoning Moses in some way, or is it just the case that there are some things we will never know? Whatever way we choose to look at it, the reality is that Moses did not get to enter in. What a shame and a shame. Moses doesn't get to enter in. Promised land, however, it's yours to possess. But what's our excuse? What's our excuse? I'm convinced that even though we can be most blessed in having a view from the top, some persons are unable to spot the openings and the opportunity made by the great protector and find their way through into the end zone. You know, it's possible to look out from the top of Mount Pisgah and see the most beautiful and luscious fruit ever seen and decide to never partake. It's possible to be offered the greatest vacation spot ever hoped for, imagined, and decide to stay home and go nowhere. It's possible to have at one's fingertips resources galore to do some great things and then decide to keep one's hands closed or in one's pockets. Oh, I've discovered that even though there are some persons who can't enter, there are others who choose or become diverted when it comes time to enter. Let's be honest. The land that Moses saw from his view from the top was still filled with promise and peril for the people. Read Joshua, the book that follows Deuteronomy, and you will discover that the promise was not always easy. The land flowed not only with milk and honey, but there were curves, speed bumps, and obstacles along the way. The view from the top is mixed. Moses can't enter, but it was also the start of a new chapter for the Israelites on that day and even us today. No, the future isn't exact, but it is the blessing of God. The future is never guaranteed to be all rosy and bright with wishful thinking and positive people all around, but a view from the top suggests it is a land of vast opportunity and God is in it. View from the top sees a God who goes before preparing the way, who bids us to come and join in the journey. Oh, I have not seen nor ear heard the things prepared for them that love God. Still having said all this, let me hasten to acknowledge that the view from the top of Mount Pisgah isn't quite frankly compared to the vision that awaits the sons and daughters of God spelled out in John's Revelation. The new heaven and the new earth where every tear is wiped away and there shall be an end to death and to mourning and crying and pain and God making all things new. This kind of vision is given to those who are able to see God's light, those who see what is, what can, and ought to be. And I'm convinced that this was the kind of vision that captured this leading character, Moses, and kept him going in the good days, the more challenging days, and even through the murmurings of sometimes faithless people. Indeed, Moses could make and navigate the long journey because he had already seen what God had showed him just from his view from the top of Mount Pisgah. He could see with his own eyes the fulfillment of the promises of God and the satisfaction that came in knowing that his labor had not been in vain and that he had made a way for others. Oh, how well we remember Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his last sermon. It too was about going to the mountaintop. He, like Moses, seemingly sensed his own impending death. He didn't expect to get to the promised land of racial justice, equality, and peace, but he was sustained by a vision for others and for this country. For Moses, it wasn't just about himself. For Dr. King, it wasn't just about himself. For Jesus Christ, it wasn't just about himself. Now I know some of you have some questions as you got the notice, and you have been perplexed by my announced planned departure at the end of the school year. Doesn't seem to fit with our desire to live happily ever after. But most recently, I looked back on a lecture I shared with the St. Paul community back in May 2003. Here are a few things I said back then. When I think about the church and the many and varied needs of laity and clergy, when I think about seminaries, money, faculty, students, administrators, buildings, endowments, and when I think about the world with all of its brokenness and need and the reality of constant change, I'm not hearing or seeing work completed.